So, Avengers Infinity War came out. "10 years, 18 movies, all leading up to this moment, and I really liked it. Whilst I didn't think it was perfect, and I will talk about some of the flaws I perceived in the film, if you want my spoiler-free opinion, there it is. It's great, fun, emotional, exhilarating, and did indeed live up to the build. What I thought the film handled really well was the huge amount of characters. We have characters from every movie from the past 10 years popping in some way or another, except for Hawkeye and Ant-Man, who both got left in the dust. And I thought they did a great job of keeping these characters separate and slowly introducing them to one another, but at the same time never feeling like you're being ripped off. A problem this kind of film could have is keeping the characters apart for too long and only introducing them to each other right at the end, which would feel a bit cheap because the whole point of you going to see this film is to see these characters who have never interacted before interact. But the film sort of slowly has them meet up over the course of the entire runtime. So bit by bit you see these different interactions, but these interactions are given time to breathe. Because that's what you want to see. You want to see these interactions. You want to see these characters who have never met before meet up. That's the real selling point of this film. It's the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man who we haven't seen too much in the universe before, getting to see them interact in new and interesting ways. That was always kind of the appeal of the Avengers films. I had many friends who, after the first Avengers film, didn't really want to watch the solo films because the real appeal was seeing these characters interact in ways you didn't expect and were enjoyable and fun. On top of that, basically every major character is given some sort of emotional through line through the film, an easy to follow character arc that we see go from point A to B to C. Whilst some characters, most notably Black Widow, are pushed to the sidelines, other characters that we haven't seen too much of, such as Scarlet Witch and Vision, really get a chance to shine. However, this can be to the film's detriment. Because there are so many plot lines, often you spend a long time away from each individual plotline before you come back to it. I found myself wondering why we hadn't seen Thor or the Guardians of the Galaxy in such a long time, and I found it to mess with the pacing and the cohesion of the film's storyline. Because everything was so separate, you were kind of forgetting that the other plotlines were even happening in the same movie until you cut back to them. This didn't ruin the film, and obviously it was kind of needed for the amount of characters and plots that happen in this movie, but it did make for a kind of jumbled watching experience at times. It didn't even feel like it was cramming in too much, just that maybe the individual plotlines needed to be chopped up a little bit more and spread out more finely, so you'd be coming back and forth between different characters more frequently. But like I said, it's only a minor complaint. My other major spoiler-free complaint is that sometimes the comedy undercuts the serious moments. This is a problem I have with pretty much every Marvel movie. I don't know why, but they seem to have really latched onto this idea that comedy is an integral part of their brand. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't want movies that are dark and serious and grimy. I like the fun, I like the comedy, but sometimes Marvel movies have a real problem of undercutting themselves. There'll be a moment where it's supposed to be serious and you're supposed to be emotionally invested, and there'll be a joke that maybe just goes a little too far in pushing it across the line. There's one in particular in Thor's storyline when he meets a dwarf that I won't really go into because of spoilers, but it just took me out of the film for a moment, and it wasn't that it was unfunny. I laughed. The audience at the cinema laughed. But it just drew me out for a second. It made me forget the seriousness and drama of the plotline and tickled my funny bone instead when it wasn't really necessary. I think they just have a kind of idea that, oh, we need a laugh every however many pages, and sometimes you don't. That isn't saying that they always do that. There are lots of great serious moments in this film that really play well and aren't ruined by overbearing comedy. But there were still a few occasions where it bugged me. And now we move into spoiler territory, so, you know, if you're planning to see this film, stop the video now, and away we go. What I really liked about this film, the thing that really sort of made it stand above other Marvel movies for me, was how deeply the themes were entrenched within the film itself. The central theme, or at least the central theme I picked up on, was the idea of sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice, and what are you willing to give up? And basically every major character has this sort of conflict through the course of the film. The most notable is of course Thanos, who in the film sacrifices his basically only love and his adopted daughter Gamora to obtain the last Infinity Stone. But we see it with other characters too. Doctor Strange is willing to give up the Infinity Stone to save Tony Stark's life, despite the fact that earlier on he said he wouldn't. Scarlet Witch is forced to sacrifice Vision, who she has come to love, because he has the Infinity Stone in his head and it must be destroyed. And Star-Lord is willing to kill Gamora to keep her out of the hands of Thanos. Its depth of theme is really only matched by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which offers an equally in-depth exploration of the themes of family and abusive families. And because the film is left on a huge cliffhanger, the theme is as well. Scarlet Witch's sacrifice of Vision is ultimately pointless. So is Star-Lord's sacrifice of Gamora. It really leaves the audience wondering about whether it's really the best thing to do to sacrifice those we love, or if we should hold on to them. It's something I'm looking forward to seeing explored further in the next film. Another thing the film does well in terms of setting up for the sequel is having character arcs that are self-contained, but also leave room for expansion in Part 2. For example, Bruce Banner, who over the course of the film is repeatedly trying to summon the Hulk who refuses to come out, at the end of the film has a resolution because he decides to fight for himself, but still leaves open the fact that the Hulk didn't come out to fight, that can be explored further in Part 2. Another is the fact that Captain America and Iron Man don't reconcile in this film. We get a moment near the beginning where Iron Man seems to be willing to reconcile, but we never explore it beyond that, leaving ground to be covered in the sequel and not resolving everything here. But this film has enough resolution to its character arcs and themes that you don't leave the theatre feeling unfulfilled. You're fulfilled but ready to see more, which is pretty much the perfect way to leave a part 1 of a 2-part film, which is something honestly I was worried about. 2-part films were something that became really popular after the Harry Potter films did it with Deathly Hallows, and I thought that was done well, but pretty much every other series that has tried it since then has failed, and it seems to have gone the way of the 3D movie, a sort of fad and it faded just as quickly as it began. But this film does a really good job of feeling like a complete whole piece and it just leaves you wanting more. It's like the first part of a really good 2-part finale on a television show. It's an episode within itself, but at the same time you're ready for the next part, you're ready to see it continue. And I have to applaud the filmmakers for that, because it was something I was kind of cynically ready to deride about this film, and it ends on a stupid cliffhanger. But the scenes of devastation, destruction, and death after Thanos finally assembles the Infinity Gauntlet are really emotionally moving. They're incredibly well shot, and the acting in them is superb. However, I did have a problem with them. Up until that point, the movie had done such a good job of convincing you anyone could die, and characters did die. Vision, Gamora, and Loki all died in ways that were satisfying in that they fulfilled the characters' various arcs and stories, but also incredibly emotionally moving. And then there were the near-deaths. I don't think there was a single person in my cinema who didn't believe Iron Man was dead when Thanos stabbed him. The gasps of shock and despair were very real. But at the end of the film, Thanos clicks his fingers and wipes out 50% of the population of the universe, including several beloved characters. And unfortunately, that felt hollow to me. That felt like something that would be reversed. By having so many characters that we know are going to continue into future films, the Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man specifically, we know are getting sequels. To have them be killed off in a way that eventually you know they'll be brought back, kind of cast doubt over every other depth in the film. Obviously there's going to be some sort of resolution with the Infinity Gauntlet bringing these people back to life, but it suddenly made me wonder, is Gamora staying dead? Is Vision staying dead? Or are these characters going to be brought back to life? What about characters that die in the sequel? Are they going to come back to life as well? Something that the film did so well of maintaining this aura of anyone can die was a little bit ruined in the last few moments for me personally. Because suddenly the cynic in me who knows that Marvel has 10 more years of movies planned out more likely than not, knows that these characters aren't staying dead, and it casts aspersions over all death. It's the same thing in comics. No one believes that Superman's gonna stay dead because at the end of the day, we all know Superman comes back to life a lot. We all know superheroes come back to life a lot. And that was something the film would manage to avoid until that point. That's not necessarily to say that it's a bad ending, it's a great ending, it's an emotionally moving ending. But to me, it kind of played the hand of eventually we'll be bringing these characters back. But that's my main problem with this film, and it's not so much a problem with the film itself, but the storytelling constraints of a persistent universe. And especially of a persistent universe where I know so many of these characters are getting sequels. However, to talk about one more positive before I wrap up, Thanos is brilliant. Probably the Marvel Cinematic Universe's best villain today, and one of the best villains I've ever seen in a film, I might want to say. His character is complex, He's incredibly intimidating, and his motivations are completely understandable. You always understand why Thanos wants what he wants, and it makes perfect sense. He's what the best villain always is, the hero of their own story. But the things he does make him so hateable and disgusting that you just want to see him get his ass kicked. But he's so intimidating because we see him being built up so well over the course of the film. Add on to that the CGI on him is very expressive. It's really quite a marvel how far CGI has come in the past 10 years or so. I can't imagine a CGI villain in 2008 looking anywhere near this expressive and emotive. Usually I'm not a fan of CGI only characters, but in this case they really made it work. He's basically the main character of the film, to the point where the usual end of credits character will return. Thanos will return. Also, speaking of the credits, the greatest fake out ever, where everyone in my cinema once again believed that there was going to be a post-credit scene in the middle of the credits, like there usually is in these Marvel movies now, but there wasn't. Simple but perfect. I kind of would have respected them more if they hadn't put the one at the end in, but I liked it enough that I'm not going to complain. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Avengers Infinity War. I thought it was incredibly well shot, I thought the characters were all fun and interesting, and I thought the plot moved along at a great pace. The action was really good. Just a perfect superhero movie. I'm not going to say this is as good as Citizen Kane or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or whatever your favourite film is, but it distilled everything that I personally love about superhero movies into one package. And while I did have my problems with it, and my problems with it existing in this persistent cinematic universe, it overall rose above those expectations and was a great film. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and what did you think of Avengers Infinity War? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Thanks for watching, and tune in next time.